Hey guys, this is Mitch with FinePoint CGI, and today we're going to talk about interacting with JavaScript from Godot. So we're going to go through the process of talking about what the JavaScript interface is. We are going to go through and talk about how to call your own custom JavaScript functions from Godot. We're going to talk about how to use third-party libraries within Godot, and we're going to talk about callbacks and how to use callbacks with Godot. And finally, to round it all out, we're going to go ahead and create a hotly requested interaction inside of Godot for web, which is allowing the user to download a file and to allow the users to upload a file, which is really useful for things like saving your game and loading your game, or maybe just getting information from the player in a JavaScript form. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to talk about some of the basics of how to interact with JavaScript inside of Godot. So first, we're going to create a 2D scene, and we are going to right click and go ahead and attach a script here. And we'll just call it JavaScript demo. We're going to go ahead and create that. And from here, we're going to do a very simple console log using the JavaScript system. So what we can do is first, we can hit enter on our ready function here. And we can go ahead and type var console is equal to JavaScript dot get interface, and we're going to go ahead and grab our interface console. And from here, we can just say console dot log test log. Now, what is this doing? So in JavaScript, we have this thing called get interface, and get interface allows us to pull our interface from the JavaScript system. So what that means for us is it allows us to go and fetch the various interfaces that JavaScript offers and call functions on that. So the easiest way is kind of to demo it out for you guys. So let's go ahead and go to project export, and let's go ahead and add our HTML5 here. And that's really all we need to do to get our stuff to interact with JavaScript. So if we go ahead and hit close and we hit the little HTML5 icon here, if you click on that, it's going to say, hey, no main scene has been defined, and we haven't created a main scene. So we need to go ahead and save this, and let's just call it demo JavaScript project. And then we'll go ahead and hit the 5 and select our scene here, and it will go ahead and dump it out. And it actually came out to this little section of my screen here. So let me pull this over for you guys. All right, so you'll see if we go ahead and open up our console inside of our Chrome, which in my case, it's under more tools, developer tools. And I don't know if you guys can see that necessarily. So let me pull this over a little bit for you. If I click on my menu, I go to more tools and I go to developer tools, or I hit Control Shift L or I. I'm not sure if that's Control Shift I or L. I guess we'll find out. If I go ahead and click on that, you will see that I got my test log. Now, one of the things that's really cool is if you just type like console, you can see that you can have that interface, right? Well, it's the same thing with most things inside of JavaScript. So if you were to type like window dot, all of these things you can use with Godot natively now. So you just call it by saying get interface and then whatever it is that you want. So you could say get interface window.document, and then you can actually pull stuff from your document. So if you want to interact with something like a button or like a text box, you could through this method. It's actually really efficient, and it's actually really cool and very easy to use for the most part. So one of the things that I was talking to somebody about recently was interacting with MetaMask, which is a cryptocurrency wallet system. And you could do that by getting the interface MetaMask and pulling that data from that system. So now that we have this working, let's go ahead and go back to our project here and let's talk about JavaScript objects. So in JavaScript, you have these things called JavaScript objects. So what we can do is we can say var array is equal to JavaScript dot create object. And then from here, if you go into quotes, you can just type whatever you'd like. So you could say array, comma, 5, and that'll create an array of 5 objects. And then from here, you can just set your array and call your stuff. So you could say array 0 is equal to, 22, and then you could say array, 4 is equal to 10, right? And that would allow you to have native JavaScript objects inside of your Godot code. And the reason why this is useful is if you need to pass objects from Godot to JavaScript, you can just create a JavaScript object, put your data in the JavaScript object, and then pass it along. And it's actually, like I said, quite simple. So if I said array.pop, what that's going to do is it's going to pop the value. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull out this element here, our 4th item in our array, and pull it out. So if I were to say, console.log, and I were to go ahead and log our array, you'll see that it's going to go ahead and pop that out. So if I stop my HTTP server, I run it, and I bring this back over like so. And then I control Shift I or L. Well, it didn't like either of them, so I guess I'll click on here, and I'll go ahead and go to More Tools and Developer Tools. Yeah, Control Shift I or L. It's weird. All right, you'll see that we have our test log, and then we have our array elements of 4, and you can see that our array 0 has an item, and the 4th position got removed from our array. So that's kind of how you create JavaScript items. So that's great, and that's really cool. So now, and I know I'm kind of running through these things, but it's, a lot of this is actually pretty interesting and really cool and fairly easy to use, surprisingly. JavaScript is one of the things that I'm not a big fan of and I'm not very good at. So it's nice to see that it's simple. So what if we want to call out to a JavaScript function that we created, right? Well, first we need to make our JavaScript function, and then for us to be able to call it, and then we're going to need to grab our interface, and then we can call that function, right? So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is we can go up to our project, we can go to export, and then we can look at our export settings here. Down here on the right, there is a section called head include, and head include allows us to write our own scripts inside of our Godot project without needing an external template. So what we can do is we can click here and we can put a little bracket here and type script. And then we can go ahead and write our own function. So if we kind of close our script. Now the downside to this is that we don't have syntax highlighting, which is kind of a pain, but I mean, it's reasonable. I mean, you could always type it somewhere else and just paste it in here, I guess, and that would work. But we can type function test, and we will go ahead and put our braces in. And then we'll go ahead and just tell it to do something simple like console log or maybe alert or something like that. So I will say console.log, we have used our custom function. And then if we go ahead and close this, we need to go ahead and call that function, right? Well, we can't call it without a reference inside of Godot. So we need to go ahead and get a reference to this function. So what we can do, we can pull a reference to window and then grab our function. So what we can do is we can say var window is equal to javascript dot get interface, and we can say quote window. And what that's going to do is that's going to fetch our window. And our window in JavaScript, I don't know if you guys know, I don't know how much you guys know about JavaScript, but our window is this. It's all of this. So if you were to type window in here and you were to hit enter, it'll give you everything that your window has, which is literally your entire project. It's everything. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. So anything in here you can call using window dot, right? Including any functions that you have up in your project export head include. So you can actually call this function really simply by just saying window dot whatever function. So we can say window dot test, and that's it. And we've called that function. So now if I stop my browser and I reopen it, and I open up my DevTools, you will see that we have used our custom function. I mean, it's that simple. You literally can just call it as if it's there. So now the next big thing we have to talk about is what's called callbacks. Okay, a callback is calling code from JavaScript to your Godot project. Okay, so it's going the opposite direction than the way we've been going. We've been calling JavaScript. Now I want to do it the opposite way, right? Now it is a bit funky, I'm not going to lie, but it does work decently well. So what we need to do is first, we need to define what our callback is. So we're going to go up here, we're going to hit enter, and we are going to type var callback is equal to JavaScript dot create callback self, comma, and then whatever the name of your callback is. Now we don't actually have a callback yet created, right? But let's go ahead and create one. Now you can see here javascript.create callback self, and then the name of your callback, right? So it's much like how we do signals. This is the object that we're calling to call when that callback gets called. And this is the name of that signal effectively. So what we'll do is we'll come down here and we will say function console log, and we will go ahead and just say print callback has fired off. And I got to do func, not function. I've been coding in JavaScript too much. So now that we have this, we have ourselves a function that we can call with our callback. So we'll go ahead and grab console log and we'll paste that in there. Now, one of the things that we need to do is we need to make sure that we allow our JavaScript system to give us any returned data, right? So if you were to say, use JavaScript to call out using a library like Axios, you need to return your data, right? So we need to accept that data in some way. So if we can come here, we can just type args, and that will allow us to get our callback to get fired, if that makes sense. So what's going to happen is it's going to go do whatever it's going to do. It's going to come back, call this callback, and then pass in any data that we returned here, and then go ahead and print our text here. So now that we've created our callback, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and call a function that's going to give us a callback. So what we should do is we should come down here and say var notification is equal to JavaScript dot get interface, and we'll say notification. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and call and request some permissions here. So we'll say notification dot request permission. And now once that request permission function is done, we need to call back and go ahead and pass that data to the function. So once that function fires, we need to tell it what callback we want it to use. So we can just say dot then, and we can call our callback. So callback. What that's going to do is as soon as the project runs, it's going to ask for me to give it permission. And then once I say yes or no, then it's going to call back and fire this off. So let's go ahead and see that in action. So let's click run in browser. You'll see it pops up and says, hey, we would like to show you notifications. And I'm going to go ahead and grant that. So let's hit OK. And then click on our little three buttons here, go to more tools, developer tools, and you'll see that we have used our custom function like we did before. And now we also have callback has been fired off. So it came out and fired back our callback. Now, if we hit enter and go print, and then we go ahead and print our args here, and then we go ahead and rerun our project. When it pops up, it's not going to ask me for permissions because I already gave it permissions. But if we come up here and go ahead and go to more and developer tools, you'll see that we have gotten back an object that says granted, which means, hey, we got our permissions. So the nice thing is, since we got back a object that has granted in it, we could actually say if args0 is equal to granted, then I want you to print callback has fired off. If I do this, it's equal. I always forget the double equals. And then we could say else, go ahead and just print whatever it is that we got. So if I run this in my browser here, you should see, if I go to more tools, developer tools, that our callback has been fired off because I granted permission before to this. So that's kind of how we use callbacks. We can basically just call back to our Godot instance and run functions with a dot then, if that makes sense. And then we get back whatever they return with that. So what if we want to integrate a third-party library inside of our Godot project? Well, we can totally do that. All we need to do is we need to go to our project and our export, and we can come down here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this little icon here, which is going to expand this so we can actually see what we're typing here. And all we need to do to add our third-party library is to call it right here. So we could say little bracket and script src is equal to, and we need to direct it to our script's location. Now, in my case, I'm just going to copy and paste this. It's going to be the Axios plugin here. Link is in the description below if you guys want to use this, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then from here, we can actually call it just like we could call our notifications, right? So we can just go var Axios is equal to JavaScript .get interface Axios. And then from here, we can just say Axios dot, and then we can use our Axios protocol. So we can just say .get quote https://api.github.com/users/mapbox. And what that's going to do is that's going to go and fetch out some mapbox data. And from there, we can call our callback, right? So we would just do a dot then. and then we would call our callback. So callback, right? And since we're doing this callback here, I'm going to go ahead and just say print args, and we'll just go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my little web browser icon here, and I'm going to click and run it in our web browser here. So it's going to pop up, it's going to run all of the code, and we are going to go to more tools, developer options, or developer tools. So you can see that we have no interface Axios registered. If we go down to our console, we start typing Axios, so A-X-I-O-S, you can actually see that it is lowercase here. So we're going to go ahead and copy that and paste it, and then let's go ahead and run this once more. Let's see if that fixes it. So go to more tools, developer tools. You will see that it has fired off our callback, and it's logged a JavaScript object. Now you can see we do have some invalid operands. That's probably because I'm doing this by passing my args, and then my args0 probably doesn't have anything in it. It's going to be my guess. But that's how you can actually call a third-party library, is literally just by pulling it out like this. Now, let me get rid of that print there. Now, what if instead we wanted to do our own script and our own Axios call? Well, what we can do, if we go ahead and get rid of this because we don't need it, what we can do is we can go up to our project, we can go to our export, and we can click on this little icon here, and we can go ahead and write a JavaScript function, much like we did with test. We could do that, but do our Axios call, right? So we're going to do script and then close our script here. And then we can go function Axios call. And then we can say Axios.get quote https://api.github.com/users/mapbox unquote, and then put our little brace there. And then we need to get our response back. So we go .then response is equal to pointer to this function, right? So what we're saying is, hey, go ahead and run this little function once we get our response, and then go ahead and do this, right? So we'll say console.log response.data. And what that's going to do is that's going to log our response data. So if we go ahead and hit OK and we hit close, we can actually call this just by doing what we did earlier, where we called out to our window and window.test. Well, since we already have our window here, we can actually just say window dot, and I believe we called it Axios call. So we'll say windows.axios call, and you'll see that when we run this, it'll go ahead and fire off that Axios call, and we should return some data. So if we go to more tools, developer tools, oh, we do have an error. Oh, I think I know what's going on. I think I forgot to do that. So I need to put my end parentheses and my semicolon. Let's see if that fixes our problem. So we'll go ahead and rerun this in the web browser. Click on our little thing and then go to developer tools. There we are. And you can see that now we have an object that is our map data, our map events and things like that. It's just basically a test Axios call here. But you can see that we now have all of this cool data right here. But what if we wanted to return some data? Well, you'd have to do that through a callback. So you can just do it through this method, but you can also pass in a callback. So what does that mean? Well, what we can do is we can say var Axios callback is equal to JavaScript dot create callback self, comma, and then whatever our callback would be. So in my case, I'm just going to log some data. So we'll say Axios log data, let's say. And then we can come down here and say func Axios log data. We have to pass in our args, and then we can go ahead and print our arguments, right? Which should just basically print our incoming data. So nothing too crazy, right? So now what we can do is we can go into our Axios call here and pass in that callback. Just like that. But our callback, if we look at our export, does not have that incoming object. So we need to go ahead and take that object in. So we'll say callback. And then we got to call that callback. So we can say callback and pass in the arguments that we want. So in our case, it's going to be response.data. And we'll put a semicolon right here. Now let's go ahead and see what happens if we try to run this. So if we go ahead and click on our HTML5 icon and click run, we can go ahead and go to more tools, developer tools, and you'll see that our callback got called and it printed out that object. So that's kind of the power of being able to be flexible and passing in objects and things like that. So I've noticed that this method works really, really well in specific cases. And I've noticed that this method works really well in specific cases as well. And I know that I'm kind of leaving it generic for you guys, but basically I found that this works pretty well for most cases, but sometimes it would return null data back to me, like a null JavaScript object. And in that case, this is a good option where you pass in your callback to be called, and you just do that. So the last thing that I have for you guys is how to upload and download data. I'm kind of using this as like a culmination of what we've learned, so that way we can actually, put this and make something useful, right? So let's go ahead and get rid of this script here, and we'll go ahead and add in a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and detach the script. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go ahead and attach a new one, and we're going to call it savegamedata.gd. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to click two buttons, and you're going to be able to download a JSON file. And then you're going to be able to upload a JSON file. And what it's going to do is it's going to print out the contents of that JSON file for us to be able to use. So what we're going to do is first, we're going to right click, add in a child node, and let's go ahead and add in a button. And then we'll go ahead and duplicate that button, and we'll pull this out, something about here, I guess. And then we'll pull this one out, something about here, I guess. And we will say download and upload. All right, and this one is upload, and this one is download. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to attach these to that script. So we'll click on our node, we'll click button down, and we're going to go ahead and connect that. We're going to do the same thing with our download. So we'll click on download, and we'll go ahead and do on button down and connect that as well. So first, we're going to need to create some download code, right? So we need to go ahead and create a function that allows us to download a file. So what we're going to do is we're going to say JavaScript dot download buffer, and we need to pass in data. So that buffer, that pool byte array, is just data that we can pass in. So in my case, I'm just going to say hello dot to underscore UTF-8, and that's just going to encode it for us. And then we're going to name it something. So we're going to say save data.txt, and we'll need to wrap that in quotes because I forgot to. So we'll wrap that in quotes. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to go ahead and just download a file, right, as a text file. So anything that we put in here can be downloaded effectively as a text file. In our case, it's going to be a .txt file. So if we run this, we should have a button right here that when we click on it, it'll go ahead and try to pop out our saved data. And if we save this and I double click on that text, you will see that it'll say hello. So anything that we pass in here, be it JSON data or otherwise, we can just go ahead and have it right there. So that's the first half of our puzzle already completed. Basically what we would do is we would just pass in our JSON data, something like, something like that, I would guess. And you would have your JSON data to pass in. Now I'm probably doing this wrong because my JSON skills are terrible. All right, so that's not valid JSON. So I need to put this in single quotes and then quote, quote, double quote, single quote. And that should do it. That should be valid JSON. So now that we've got downloading working, we need to get uploading working, but uploading is very complicated. You need an input field and an input type. You need to have a onChange event, right? That says, hey, when this is changed, go ahead and fire off a callback, right? Well, that's all going to need to be done on the JavaScript side of things. So let's go ahead and go up to our project and then go to our export. And then let's go ahead and open this up. And we don't really need any of this, but I'm going to keep it just so that we have it. But I'm going to say script, and then I'm going to close my script. Okay. And what I can say is I can say function get file, and I'm going to pass in a callback, much like what we did up here with our Axios call. We're going to do the same thing. So we're going to pass in a callback just because it's a little easier to work with in our case. So I'm going to put some braces in like this. And then we're going to say window dot input is equal to document dot create element input. All right. And then I'm going to say input dot type is equal to whatever type we want them to put in. In our case, it's going to be a file. And then I am going to say, okay, when that input gets changed, so input dot onChange is equal to E, pointer, and put in our two braces here. Var file is equal to e.target.files, and we'll say the first element of that file. Okay, so before I go any further, I know you're probably going, Mitch, what are you talking about, right? Well, what we're doing is we are creating an element here, okay? In our window.input, we are creating on our window, we are creating an input object. We're saying document, go ahead and create an element and call it input, okay? And we're saying, hey, when that input gets changed, I need you to go and fetch the first file that it has. We're saying, hey, when this changed, make that change object, so that thing that we got, that event, take that event and pass it into this function. And then we're saying, hey, our file that we just downloaded or uploaded, I guess in this case, e.target, which is the input target, .files, okay? And we're getting that first element, so the file that they selected. Now what we can do is we can say var reader is equal to our new file reader, okay? And that's going to allow us to read our files, right? Because we need to read our files when we pull a file from our user. Now, what we can do is we can say reader dot read as text. And then we need to pass in our file and then what our file is encoded as. Now we did set a very special encoding. If I hit OK and I close this right here, UTF-8. And the reason why I specified UTF-8 is because that guarantees that our parser knows what that text document is. We don't want to give them the option to maybe be something different and then have it completely blow up our system. We want it to be in UTF-8. So we can go to our project and then go to export and then click on this thing again. And we need to tell it what it's going to be. So I'm going to say quote UTF-8 because we told it to be UTF-8. We're going to close our quotes and then throw ourselves a semicolon there. Now we're going to need to do a sub routine effectively, right? So we're going to say reader.onload is equal to reader event arrow, and we're going to pass this in. And then we're going to say, okay, once the reader has read the file, now we can go ahead and pass our content back, right? So we can say callback reader event dot target dot result. And that will allow us to get back our data. So now from here, we can make sure that everything looks correct. So this is good. This is closed. This needs to be tabbed in because I'm going to go insane if my stuff's not formatted properly, or at least somewhat formatted properly. And I think everything else should be good. One of the nice things about using a template, which I'm going to have a tutorial on soon, is that you can actually just have your code in VS Code, and it makes it way easier to write this code. That's why I suggest you just use VS Code to write this and then just paste it in. But let's go ahead and hit OK, hit close. And now when the user clicks on the upload button, we need to go ahead and fire off that event to load our data. So what we can do is we need to first we need to know what the name of the thing was, because I wrote it and I forgot what it was. Get file. That sounds great. So I'm going to copy that so I don't forget. So up here we can say first we need to fetch our window. So we need to say var window is equal to javascript.getInterface quote window. And then we need to call our function. So we can say window dot get file, and we need to pass in our callback, but we don't have a callback yet, right? So let's go ahead and make one. So we'll go up here and we'll say var file load callback is equal to javascript dot create callback. We'll say self, comma, and let's name it file parse. Then we'll go ahead and copy this, and we'll come down here and we'll say func file parser. And goodness, two languages is killing me. And we'll pass in our args here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to print our arguments, so we can just see what they are, basically. So let's go ahead, and if everything's done correctly, which it's not because I just missed my callback right here. So on line 21, we have window.getFile, but we didn't pass in a callback. So let's go ahead and pass that in. File load callback. And now let's go ahead and fire off this and let's see what it does. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And if all is well, when we click download, we will be able to download our saved data, which is right here. So we can just say, yep, downloaded. And you can see that it has our data. We've already seen this, but I'm going to show you guys for effect. So there you go. It's pulled down the data. Everything's great. Now, if we click upload, nothing happens, which means something broke. So let's go to more tools, developer tools. Let's see what blew up on us. Doesn't look like anything did. Let's see. Windows, window, get file. Okay, so I figured out what I was doing wrong. Instead of needing to do it on button down, I actually need to do it up here on my ready. I need to put this code up here. And the reason why is because when you are doing all of the code that we have here, and I was very foolish to think that I could have done it this way. I'm creating the window element and I'm setting my event to be ran when it changes. I'm not changing the event. I need to actually go and change the event, if that makes sense. So what we can do to go ahead and fire off the event is down here. We can say var window is equal to JavaScript like we did before. Dot get interface window like we did before. And then we can go ahead and call that input box. So we can say window dot input dot click. So basically what we were doing was we were creating our object on our document hidden somewhere, in the document, but we were never actually clicking on the input box for us to be able to input data into that box, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and click on here and hit run in browser. And then let's go ahead and try our upload code now and see if it works. All right, so let's go ahead and click on upload and you'll see that it pops up for our upload. So now you can see all the files that you can upload. So now if I click on our saved data, I click open. Let's see if it went ahead and logged and fired our callback. And there we go. You can see that we have hello and test. So if we want to access this data, what we can do is we can go ahead and say, okay, on our file parser, let's go ahead and print args0 dot, I believe it's hello. Yeah, hello. And that should, in theory, print our test word. It should print this test. So let's go ahead and fire this off and let's see if that actually works, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's going to. So let's see if we can get her to go. So we click upload. We go ahead and drag in our save.data, and then we go to our tools and we go to our developer tools. And we have a bug here. So why is this not okay with what we're doing? Well, the reason why is it's saying, hey, invalid get index hello on base string. So what's coming back with args0 is strings. It's coming back as a string object, right? So we can't do .hello on a string, right? But what we can do, we can go ahead and grab our arguments here, and we need to go ahead and parse it. So we can say var data parse is equal to JSON dot parse our args, and we will go ahead and say args0, right? And then we can go ahead and say var data is equal to data parse dot result. And from here, we now have our object. So we can actually just say data dot hello, and it should pull back our data. And if we need to, let's go ahead and print our data as well, so that way we can just kind of see what's going on. So we'll go ahead and click on our HTML5 icon, click on run in browser. It'll go ahead and kick off our browser here. We'll go ahead and upload our file, do our save data, click on our three little bar here, more tools, open up our developer tools, and you'll see hello test and test. So we can actually access that data like it's an object in our project. So this is awesome and gigantic for Godot because we can go ahead and just save and load data from our web games. So it's not like it was before where we'd have to either store it off site or something like that. I mean, if it was like a competitive game or a game that you'd worry about somebody hacking and, cheating or something like that, you might not want to do this because then, you need to encrypt the data and it'd be a whole nightmare. But this is a very basic save system for your game that you can download and upload your data from the user. So that's kind of the power of the JavaScript interface system that we have now in Godot 3.4. But that is all I have for you today. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, if you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I am here to make content for you guys. Even though it doesn't show a counter, I'm still going to look at the metrics and make sure that I create good content for you guys. And hey, if you guys got a question about this, hit me up in the comments below or off on our Discord. I am more than happy to help you guys out if you guys run into any trouble or if you guys have any general questions or anything like that. And as with all of my videos, this video was a viewer suggested video. So if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. I really do pay attention to them, and that's what my entire channel is based off of, is your guys' suggestions. So let me know and I'll be more than happy to put it on my Trello board. Link is in the description if you'd like to take a look at that. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Thanks.